Hi everybody, this is Cheryl, and today I want to talk to you about the thread and the needles that's used for cross stitching. Your Aida cloth, which I've talked about many times, is a woven fabric, and it actually comes in several sizes, 11, 14, 18, and 28. 18 is your most common used. What that is it's the number of stitches or the number of little dots in an inch. And the higher the number, the fewer or the more stitches you can get per inch. So the 28 would be very, very tiny weave. Oh, smashed in. Sorry. Okay. What you use for thread is based on what you get or what kind of Aida cloth you use. The smaller the weave, the smaller amount of thread you want to use. Also, the smaller the needle. I use sharp needles. I don't know if you can see that there, sharp. And these are actually embroidery needles, and they're sizes 5 through 10. Now you can also use tapestry needles. Tapestry needles range from 20 to 28 in size. The most common size used is 24 to 26, 24 or 26. And the 28 size is extremely small. You only want to use one strand of thread when you use that small of a needle. And really, that small of a needle is not really necessary. I prefer the embroidery needles, but you can use the tapestry needles. And the same goes with the embroidery needles. The smaller the needle, the less thread. Now, what I mean by that is your embroidery floss, which would be a skein of the embroidery floss, and I've showed you about this before. It has the number on it of what the color is, and the best way to use embroidery floss is you want to pull out a length, and you want it about 15 to 18 inches, and you just pull it out like this. You don't want to use a length more than that, because then your thread is going to twist, get frayed, get knotted, and it's just not going to work as well. But 15 to 18 inches is a good length for sewing with. Now, I'm trying to separate this a little bit. Your embroidery floss, let's see if I can show you here, is made up of 6 strands of threads. Okay? All right, can you see that 6 strands? Now, those are to be separated, and I usually use 2 strands, and you just separate it into like 2 strands. You just pull 2 strands loose and you just kind of pull them apart. Okay, now there's some patterns that will call for 3 strand or even 1 strand, and the 1 strand is what you want to use for those smaller eyed needles. Those, if you use more than that, you're going to have a hard time threading your needle. Plus, it could actually break the eye on your needle. So make sure that you use the correct length, and make sure you use the correct number of strands. Okay. Now, you want to match up the amount or the weave of your Aida to the amount of strands that you want for your thread to the number of, or the size of your needle. So it's all got to pretty much match up. It's not real hard. I usually use the bigger size eye and 2 strands on 18 count. Now I am getting ready to do a project on 14 count, and I may go ahead and use 3 strands on that simply because it also will determine how much of your coverage. When you are doing a cross stitch and you are using the wrong number of strands, you're going to have white coming through, and it's not going to fill in on your design. So you want to make sure that you use a correct number for your strands, so that you will have proper coverage on your Aida cloth. Now on your patterns, Angel, can you get my pattern book there? I'm going to show you real quickly how to read the chart on your patterns. See if I can get this off here, because this will tell you this is your chart that you go by. Let's see if I can get this to where you can see it without a glare. I'm not having much luck with it. Okay, it will tell you how many strands to use for what. For this little kitten here, if you look, you can see there's little symbols on there. Now let's look at this green right here. That is it's like a little star. And so you go to the chart and you find the little star. It will tell you the number that you're supposed to use. This actually calls for DMC brand. So you would go for the DMC brand, and you would go for 701 for the number, and that will tell you. Now, for the overall pattern on these, it does tell you to use 2 strands of the floss. So it's important that you pay attention to the color, the symbol, will tell you the color, the number will tell you the color, but also how many strands. This one calls for glass beads, and it also calls for filament, which is a different type of embroidery floss. And it will tell you that for the filament, you only use 1 strand, and you actually mix it with 1 strand of floss. So sometimes you've got to mix, and this also has beads on some of them, so you also have to look at how many strands of floss to use for your beads. Now let's look at the actual pattern itself. Now if you look right here, this right here tells you how wide and how tall your actual pattern is. That will tell you how many squares on your finished product you're going to have. So from this point to the widest point, there's 26. Is it 26? And from the tallest point up here down to the bottom, it's 34. And that's how many X's are in the pattern: 26 wide and 34 tall. Now, this little arrow and this little arrow, if you go, that is supposed to be the center of your pattern. And that's where you would put, that's where your needle, when I showed you how to put it into the loop and how you mark the center of your Aida cloth, that's where you would count from on your Aida cloth. And if you're, like I started with a green, so what I did was I counted, you know, I went from here to here, and then I counted up and over. And I went from this point, the center point, up, and then from this line here, over. And that's how I was able to determine where to start. Once you get started and you actually start making your stitches, then you can kind of count from, you know, like, you know that you've got to skip a square here to make this square. Okay, so you just count over, and you can kind of judge it from there. It is called counted cross stitch because you do a lot of counting and figure, okay, from here I go how many, and from here I go how many. You know, so that's how you read your pattern. So you pay attention to the key, and you pay attention to the count on your actual pattern. Okay? I am going to do another video probably tomorrow. I actually demonstrated the back stitch, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I actually gave the wrong instructions for that. So I am going to redo the back stitch pattern tomorrow. I actually showed the stem stitch, not the back stitch. So I will demonstrate that tomorrow. All right, you all have a nice day, and I will see you tomorrow.